I think that's recording. Yeah. Well, thank you again for joining us as we talk through data-driven and what that actually means for advertisers. Both for it's great to have clients here, but it's also great to have media commerce as well. I wanted to do a quick recap on last time and talk about how you can access the videos, and then we'll jump straight into this session. So last time we spoke about what questions we ask of data to inform our strategies and plans. We are very much still in the planning and strategy phase of data-driven learning and digital skills. So we're going to keep those hats on as we talk through some different data points. We'll get into more details when we're actually going through the sections where we pull together digital media plans and really mine for insights to inform those plans. So this is very much kind of that top level view, which hopefully will underpin a lot of what we're going to talk about in the coming weeks. So last time we talked about how to ask questions of data, different types and qualities of data, how to start judging data critically and objectively. I put together a sheet, which I'll share again after this session. I don't know if everyone received it, so I'll make sure that it goes out to everyone that's on the invite of the questions that we can ask of a data source. And that's not just data that we're like delivering data, but also insight data, and a whole list of, I think there were like 20 questions there, the who's, how's and what's of data for us to really critically and objectively decide what data is good for us and which isn't. Then something we're going to build on today is hypotheses and how we can use hypotheses to start informing our audience strategies. And today we're going to be using hypotheses to draw insights out of results that we might see to help inform our plans and strategies. And then we also touched on very quickly, and I knew I was running out of time last time, so I've got less content today, but hopefully more punchy, how the DMP works and what sort of data is in the DMP. You'll notice there's no whiteboard today. Unfortunately, I'm in the office, which is great, and it's great to be in here, but I couldn't find a meeting room with a whiteboard. I think whiteboards and COVID seemingly don't mix and match well. But so I have set up a YouTube channel because I love digital, and I'll be sharing around the URL for those videos. I've got them on private at the moment, so you can only access them with the URL. Very conscious for GDPR reasons that I don't have permission from everyone on the call and to actually share that content. So we're keeping it private at the moment, but I'm more than happy if everyone is well to make them public videos so anyone can access them with or without the link by just going onto that channel. So today we are taking a second step into data-driven planning and strategy. We're going to be scrutinizing previous activity and looking to bring insights forward. And I've got a range of tools and ways of thinking here that can really help do that. We're going to be defining types of insight from emerging to verified evidence. We're going to be testing and reading results and thinking about how we can go ahead and access and pull data from platforms ourselves. I had got a section on Attribution and Encore, which is one of our attribution partners that we use for Tesco Mobile, but I'm going to actually move that to next time. Reason is A, it's only a 45-minute session, but B, it fits quite nicely with the next session, which is talking all about KPIs. Great. So to do a quick recap and to build on some of the themes that we had in the first session. So we're today really going to be talking about first-party data and the insights that we can pull from first-party data. And the type of first-party data we're going to be thinking about today is our delivery data. Later on, we'll be looking at the DMP and thinking about how we can use that first-party data to inform our plans. But this is very much from that planning point of view. You might have received a brief and you want to look back at old reports and see how you can pull data and insights forward and use them to really help your campaigns. We're also going to be touching on, so that's on that left-hand side here, we're also going to be focusing on hypotheses and how we can start creating and building on the hypotheses language that we learned last time to help inform those plans and strategies too. And hypotheses aren't just kind of out-of-the-box thinking where you just sit down and go, I want to know this about a certain audience or a certain topic. Hypotheses can be used when you're looking back at reports and looking at previous performance to go, well, what are we actually seeing here and what more can I learn next time? And the pieces of data that we're going to be talking about and I suppose learning through, and I love lots of interaction on all of these things, are terms that we throw around a lot. You'll see that as a theme on all of these sessions. There are a lot of jargon that we use. There's a lot of possibly informal terms that we use to describe quite formal things. And so parts of this talk will focus on those. One of the first ones is correlation causation. What do we actually mean by those terms, and how can we actually pull out data that corresponds to these terms? Correlation being, does something correlate to another? Do they go up and down at the same time? Whereas causation very much being this caused that. Then we've got different types of data and insights. Again, building on last time, do we have verified data, or is it verified insight, or is it emerging? And then different types of variables as well. This feels like a lot here, but all of these do link together, and it's important for us all in media to understand how they link together and how we're using the terminology to really help define what insights we're pulling out. Once we start using the right terminology, then we have the right kind of accuracy in our language, and that can fuel further discussions, further tests, further activation. Great. So lots to chat through, but we're going to start off with cause and effect, and we're actually going to go with the grey box at the bottom of the last slide first, and talk about types of variables. So variables are really what I would call the currency of data and what we work in. A variable might be, if we were just talking in a media point of view, it might be the audience that we're going after. It might be the type of ad, whether it's a video, whether it's a Facebook ad, whether it's a display ad. There are hundreds and hundreds of variables when we're doing media. It could also be time of day, day of week, what season we're in, how hot the weather is. All of these are variables that we kind of have to take into consideration all the time. And when looking at a hypothesis, and a good hypothesis should have both independent variables and dependent variables. The difference between the two of these is independent variables are the real cause, and the dependent variable is the effect. So what does that mean? The independent variable can be changed. It might be the amount of ads you serve. It might be the number of bricks in a wall. Those are all independent variables, whereas a dependent variable is what you're actually watching for a change. So I'm going to ask for audience participation while we use those definitions. I'll confirm them what they are on a couple of these hypotheses. So independent variables, again, these are the things that can be changed by the, I suppose in this term, scientist, whereas the dependent variable is what we're really watching for a change. So can anyone on this hypothesis here of thirsty rats find their I'm going to start all that again. Thirsty rats find their way through a maze quicker if there's water at the end of the maze. Which one of these is a dependent variable? Which one's the independent variable? Any takers? I can do the first one if easy, but Jamie Collins, you've come off mute. I just saw that. You can't get away from me.
Water at the end of the maze is the independent variable.
Yeah, great. And therefore the dependent variable is?
The rats finding their way through the maze quicker.
Absolutely right. So the independent variable is the thing that you probably would be changing in this experiment, i.e. putting water at the end of the maze or not. And yeah, that dependent variable is how fast that rat moves through the maze. You could also add, it wasn't hopefully a trick question, but how thirsty the rat is could also be another independent variable. But let's go for another one. Jamie, you're welcome to go again, but anybody else in the team. If I raise the temperature of a cup of water, then the amount of sugar that can be dissolved in it will be increased. Again, which is the independent variable, which is the variable that can be changed? And what is the dependent variable, which is what we're watching for a change?
Independent variables would be the temperature and the volume of water.
Cool. Yeah.
The dependent variable is then the amount of sugar.
Absolutely perfect. Thanks, Jamie Utley. Lovely stuff. And then to bring it back to our advertising speak and jargon, Last hypotheses here, serving creative relevant to online customers' interests increases their perception of loyalty. Anyone want to have a go at which is the independent and which is the dependent variables? No? Is that stunned silence or just being shy?
So the independent variable would be the serving creative to relevant customers online, and then the dependent would be their increase in loyalty perception.
Absolutely. Well done, JVC. Yeah. So as you said, serving that creative relevant to online customers, we can really change that. We could either serve a relevant creative or generic creative or irrelevant creative if we wanted. And then we're measuring that perception of loyalty. All of these are really good examples of hypotheses, and you can see how we're starting to think about cause and effect in each of these. So we've got those hypotheses at the bottom, and these variables are, as I said, the real currency of data and insights that we're working with. So what is the changing variable? What is that what is that changing thing? What is that changing piece of data? And what are we actually putting in? What is our motive? Those are your independent and dependent variables. And these ladder up really into our proof points that we could use in our plans, in our strategies, in whatever we're doing. And they come from analysis of those variables. So you might come in with several hypotheses that you want to find out from a media plan. You might have hypotheses, each should have an independent and dependent variable, hopefully one of each, which gives a nice clean hypothesis that you can actually maybe test or investigate. But once you have the results back from those hypotheses and those tests, you start to pull together proof points. And the two kinds of proofs that we often talk about are correlation and causation, and they come from analysis. But if you had to label the arrow in the middle, and I think I've given it away in the language I use, so but apologies for that. How do you get from that bottom stage to that top stage? What would you label that arrow? If anyone wants to have a go. No? Cool. Well, for today, I'm going to call that testing. And that's how we get from the hypotheses, we test them, we make sure they are valid, we really, I suppose, understand what we're seeing, and then we get to the analysis afterwards. So quite a simple stage, but making sure that we're really using this language in our plannings will help us to go through that process. As we all know, ads, and we touched on this a second ago, ads have so many variables that even working out which hypotheses you want to go after is a challenge in itself. And not all media variables, not all ads have media variables. They're also going to be external factors, may it be weather, may it be time of year, maybe even things like the price of what you're trying to sell. So having really controlled experiments in media is really difficult. And therefore getting that analysis of one test is near on impossible. What we have to do in media is continue to make hypotheses and then continue to test them and validate them. To take out some of those external factors and external variables so that we just start to understand what the media is actually doing. So to bring this to life, if you were to do a creative test of relevant versus generic creative for an audience group, I wouldn't recommend doing that once. You're not going to be able to get rid of those external factors, and maybe you're not able to get over the actual fact of, was the creative any good at all? I think over time you'll start to find those correlations, and then you might, after enough tests, go to causation afterwards. But we'll talk about that in a little more detail. Any questions on or thoughts on that? No? Great. So talking about correlation and causation. So correlation, statistical technique which tells us how strongly a pair of variables are actually related to each other and how they change together. It doesn't necessarily tell us at all about the whys and hows behind that relationship, but just says that a relationship exists. So here's this an amazing web page, which is like it's called Spurious Correlations, where lots of Nicolas Cage stats are correlated against completely irrelevant stats. And if we put this in a graph, you start to accuse Nicolas Cage of awful things. But the number of people who drowned by falling into a pool really does correlate with the number of films Nicolas Cage appears in over time. But you would never want to take that one step forward further and start accusing Nicolas Cage of serious crimes. So that causation takes that a step further than correlation. It says that any change in the value of one variable will cause a change in the other, which means one variable makes the other happen. So this is that cause and effect. It's really difficult in media to say that targeting this specific audience in this way actually causes the audience to react differently. But if we work out what those variables are, continually test them, understand first the correlation, then prove it to causation, then we have a really good case. And we can say we've removed all external factors. We really know that this ad served in this way to this audience causes an uplift. I think a lot of our analysis, and this is no necessary criticism, I think this is just due to the way we report, the way we pull data into our plans and our strategies. A lot of it is correlation rather than causation, which is absolutely fine, as long as we're using that right language and we can really start to design those tests that move it from correlation into causation. Obviously, Nicolas Cage and people drowning in pools isn't incredibly close to media, but one that is that we talk, well, I've heard people talk about is fire engines and fires. This is kind of like when we're talking about display ads driving sales potentially, or Facebook ads driving sales. In that language that we're using, we're really making it sound like there's a causation, but actually a lot of the time it can be just a correlation. In that example, if a display ad drives a sale, we really need to be able to prove that it did. We can use things like attribution to do so, or maybe even some type of econometrics, but just showing an ad before someone actually was going to buy anyway is a little bit like blaming fire engines for causing fires. Just because we always see a fire engine outside a building that's on fire doesn't mean we can necessarily always say that fire engines cause fires. I want to have a little think about how we could, if we were presented with this problem, it would be a strange problem to be presented with, maybe someone who was anti the fire brigade, how we would go around thinking about hypotheses and null hypotheses that could actually kind of disprove this point. Does anyone want to have a go at some hypotheses that we could use and think of that could say that fire engines either do cause fires or fire engines don't cause fires, and then we can kind of work that through into a bit of a test. Anybody? Okay, well, I'm happy to go on then. So I would say that the first thing we need to do if we want to see if the hypothesis is that fire engines cause fires is just find a building that is on fire that doesn't have a fire engine outside it. And that would be that really quick and easy way, a null hypothesis that would completely disprove this hypothesis. Far easier than trying to follow every fire engine around and seeing if it actually correlates with a building on fire. Does that make sense? And how this is starting to relate to media and that correlation and causation effect? Does anyone have any questions so far? No? Okay, great. We're going to continue going, and we're going to continue building this and building our relationship with data and building up how we talk about it. We've started at hypotheses and thinking about those variables, both independent and dependent variables, really our currency. Through lots and lots of testing, we start to get some proof points, and we really need to be careful about our language between correlation and causation. Something actually just correlate? Does our media spend correlate to sales going up, or is actually that targeting causing something to go up? And can we actually do a very quick test to negate one from the other? An example of this might be, and it's something we talk about a lot in performance is doing like a charity test. So splitting out the audience A, B, serving some with a, for example, Tesco mobile message, and some with a message that isn't related to Tesco mobile whatsoever. So it might be a cancer research message. What we can then do is follow that, deliver it in exactly the same way, see if the audience behaves in the same way, and then we could start to just really quickly go, actually, this display ad isn't, it might be correlating, and the spend might be correlating with the number of sales, but we can see that the sales between cancer research creative and Tesco mobile creative are exactly the same. But if we found a difference, we could actually start to decide, okay, there's a causation here. Maybe our mobile messaging is really working hard for us and is actually driving that sale because we see that difference. You could call that also incrementality, but it is a causation effect. Even incrementality is in that ballpark of causation. Another build on this is econometrics, which goes the other way. So rather than doing like a charity test, econometrics tries to pull all the other factors, that the external variables that might be affecting performance of business, and says the thing that's left, the only thing that we can't exclude is that media budget that we've been spending in all these different channels. And that's kind of like the really bold and strong approach, trying to look at every single variable that might be affecting performance and coming out with a causation based on negating all those different variables. So there are two different ways that you can approach that. Just like the fire truck example, you can either try and find that building that is on fire which doesn't have a fire truck, or you can go to follow every single fire truck and try and find the incident where you don't see them put a fire or set fire to a building. Great. After analysis comes interpretation, because we can clearly show in graphs and whatever data that we might have available, correlations and causations. But really, the next stage of this is to interpret it into some real results and insights that we can actually use. And that interpretation allows us to go from channel-specific stuff or creative-specific stuff into the kind of realms of where we're using data from one pot to really feed data in another pot and feed those insights in our plans and strategies. I know that I'm throwing lots of terms at you, but this is on purpose so that you have, so we all on this call have the tools to be able to really help describe bits of data or analysis that we're putting together. And those different types of interpretations really range from indicative to verified to emerging insights and to confirmed insights. And how I draw these out is kind of like this. So we start off with those indicative results. That might be a correlation, it might be a causation, but it's kind of indicative. You still want to prove it again and again. You still really want to show that that is fact. And that's what I would call an indicative result or an indicative piece of data. So we haven't yet been able to prove it significantly. It still needs more testing, and more testing equals more time. But over time, indicative results can lead to verified results. So you can then start to verify over time that yes, this display campaign is really driving performance, or this social campaign is really driving this engagement with the brand. That's over time, lots of correlation, lots of causation testing, lots of hypotheses will really give us those verified results that we can hang our hat on. But you want to take these results and keep building on them so that you start to get some insights out of it. And those insights will be broader, and we're pulling together data here, starting for the very currency of data, which are those, I had a mind blank, those hypotheses and those tests that we've done. Then we've gone into proving it and those proof points, and now we're getting into data that is indicative, verified, and now it starts to be emerging insight. And that emerging insight could be about not just a creative, but about a channel. It could be about an audience. However, we're building that up from the bottom, from the very currency of variables all the way through. That process should be completely transparent, and you should be able to follow it all the way up. And the last stage really is that confirmed insight. So again, as the data kind of grows from the bottom up, you're going to get fewer and fewer insights, and then emerging insights, and you're going to get fewer and fewer confirmed insights. So you want to have insights that are backed by loads and loads of current pieces of data, which all come from your hypotheses. And that's how we're starting to build it. And this language can really help to deliver ideas and concrete plans and concrete strategies to, well, whoever you need to present them to. Maybe to Tesco as a client, or maybe Tesco clients into the business, and vice versa. You can start to say that we've got a piece of data that correlate. So rather than just saying in your plans or your PCAs, this drove this, you can start to have the conversation where you go, well, we've seen this correlation. These are the 3 tests we're going to do to try and prove causation. Off the back of that, we're going to think about what sort of results and data that this can give us, and how we're going to verify that. And lastly, what we want to get to is understand potentially how this audience is interacting with Twitter to really drive that brand uplift. So you can see how we're starting to ladder all the way up to the top, and then that confirmed insight, again, something you can hang your hat on, something that you can apply to all plans going forward, but needs to be really backed up by lots and lots of rigor. Probably would have been helpful if I went to that slide while I was talking all that through, but you get the idea. So next, we're going to touch on the currency and those variables, and what kind of variables that we're seeing in digital media at the moment. There are hundreds, as you can imagine, and we can talk a little bit about those. So identifying your currency. I'm taking this screenshot yesterday evening of a nice looking ad on a Guardian webpage, and it feels a little bit, I am a coffee drinker, maybe it's very targeted at me. I do own an espresso machine, so maybe that's double targeting. Maybe there's a lot of creative targeting going on in the background, or maybe it's some type of site takeover, and they've just asked the Guardian to hit lots of people on the cricket pages of the website. Not really sure what's backing that up, and as a customer, you never really know. But if we were this coffee brand, we would have to really, we'd be sitting on a shed ton of data, and to really understand how this ad might affect my purchases going forward, we really need to start thinking about which of those data points might be most relevant. And that's where that hypotheses and forming the hypotheses, working out what currency we're looking at and what data points we're looking at, really start to make a difference. So Google will tell you that there are about 40 data signals they get from every single ad impression served, but I think it's probably closer to 100. The data signals that of an ad, and if you can really start thinking about how these build up, would be the ad itself. It might be the size of the ad, the type of creative, whatever, like all of those different aspects. If you held an ad in your hand, those would all be their certain dimensions. Their weight, their quality, the picture, whatever it might be. Those are all data signals from an ad, all of which we can start to mine for insights. We can start to really think about how they're backing up our hypotheses. But there's already, in that first section, there's a lot there. Then you've got system as a whole subsection of what's going behind the ad and what data Google or Facebook is collecting when that ad is served. And that system can be the environment it's in, the platform it's on, the device it is. All of those things really start to create a massive range of data signals that are at our fingertips, but we need to be, again, wary of how we use them, because we could get right down a rabbit hole. Then you've got all the things like time. Is it day of week, time of day, whatever it might be, the actual hour it's served in. Is it over lunchtime? There are lots of things just within time that we can look at. How this is actually delivered and the cost of the ad, and all of those aspects as well of the actual buying of it. And then location. Is it in the UK? Is it in London? Where did we actually serve that ad? Was it off the back of someone who saw an out-of-home ad? So you can start to see how many data signals are actually at our fingertips for just that one impression. And if you're this coffee brand, that's a staggering amount of data. And without a clear hypothesis, where do you even start? So that's what we're going to talk about for about 10 minutes, and then we'll wrap up. So here's an example of a report I picked at random. It's a Tesco stores report for a cost per download campaign for Clubcard. As you can see, this is our kind of standard reports where we show impressions, clicks, downloads, cost per download, and costs in it. I'd say these reports are really great, and they're great for one reason only, and that's to show you how the campaign is performing in terms of the budget going in and the outputs that we're measuring. But I would be wary about really pulling and drawing insights and correlations and causations out of this report. Obviously, the teams that pull these reports together do have to come up with commentaries on a weekly basis and talk about delivery and talk about pacing and how things are, how they believe they're doing. But when we actually come out at the end of a campaign and look towards the next campaign, there are lots and lots more things around all of those data points, around the hypotheses that we could draw from here, that can really help to fuel a rich response to brief. So if we were to go have a look at a couple of these lines, I could start to see that loyal shoppers seem to have a really great cost per download, which is that far right column, whereas whatever the custom audience is, again, we should ask the digital teams what that is, seem to have very few downloads, and that seems to be far too expensive. We could draw the conclusion that we should probably downweight that custom audience, upweight the loyal shoppers if we have the volume and the capacity to do so. But what I'd quite like us to do now is start thinking about, rather than just reacting like that to one of these reports, start thinking if this was an end of campaign report, what hypotheses would we build off the back of this that we can then go and test and start to really understand the difference between, for example, those loyal shoppers versus that custom audience that we've built. And I've spoken for quite a while there, but I'm hoping to open this up to the floor and think about ask you all to think about the hypotheses that you start putting together to get more involved with the data being shown in these reports and start really thinking about how to bring this out into those emerging and verified insights. Any takers? No? All right, well, I'm going to kick us off. Hopefully by me kicking us off, we might get some extras from across the team. So I would say here there's an interesting one where both Wix and Roshni audiences that we're targeting have incredibly similar results to delivered impressions, to cost per download, to the actual download numbers themselves, like freakily, oddly similar. I think my hypothesis would be that Wix and Roshni's are very similar audiences that shows very similar online behaviors. That could be a hypothesis that we then ask back to the teams and start to think about some tests that could either prove that or disprove that. And that would be going back to the signals from an ad, and we could then start pulling out the actual delivery and saying, okay, actually, we delivered the Wix campaign a lot on news sites, whereas Roshni was far more on lifestyle sites. Suddenly, we quickly disproven that hypothesis, and we can start to think about, okay, is there something else that might explain why Wix and Roshni audiences are so very similar? Anybody got any other hypotheses they want to call out and chat through based on this data? No? All right, I'm not going to pick on people, but you can. I will throw out another one that comes to the top of my head if I was staring at this, and it was the one I started with. Loyal shoppers seem to be I suppose, the most likely to download the Clubcard app. Can we really prove that? So the hypotheses would be loyal shoppers download the app more times or more frequently, or generally are more open to downloads than non-loyal shoppers. We could propose an A/B test against that, loyal shoppers versus everyone excluding loyal shoppers, and really follow that customer journey, see all those data points within an ad, and hopefully come out with some causations and then further testing might get onto some correlations. It might be that over time, with all of that testing and hypotheses and data finding and using those hypotheses to go and mine the right data within the platforms, we can start to build a really comprehensive picture of what loyal shoppers are, and if we should only go after loyal shoppers. Or through testing, we might be able to do a test that says, actually, loyal shoppers with an A/B test showing a charity creative or serving to a holdout group and measuring the uplift there tells us that these shoppers are going to download the ad anyway. There's no point spending against them. So that would be our null hypotheses, and we can actually then reinvest everywhere else, which might be far more incremental. So that's how we want to start reading these reports and start building that into our planning and strategy going forward. Great. And that's it. So before mining platforms, you need to go through the thought process to find the data you need. And when you've got that in front of you, welcome to pull up this slide and start working really from the bottom up, thinking about the variables, thinking about the correlations and the causations, and then thinking about how you can pull some really good insights together that can help fuel plans and strategies going forward. Nice. Any questions on that? All right. Well, we've kind of finished a little bit early, but if you have any questions, that would be great. Hopefully this is food for thought and you can go away and start thinking about this. The next time you get a campaign report through or an end of campaign report through, do it as a bit of an exercise, really scrutinize the data you're seeing. Next time you're putting together a brief or a response to a brief for the next campaign, bring in that last report that you've got, which is relevant, and start to think about, oh, what of this could we test? What could we learn more about? Can we start to really build all the way up to confirmed insights around our product or around our audience, whatever it might be. And then from the flip side, let's make sure that we're using the right language to really describe the data that we're seeing and the data that we're putting together and sharing. So that might be talking about correlation rather than causation. It might be talking about indicative results versus verified results. There's no right or wrong answer. Just because you can correlate something and not confirm it isn't a problem at all. It just shows that we're on the right path. We need to just test it a little bit more. Great. So I'm going to finish off with looking ahead to next time, which is actually in 2 weeks' time, as we have a digital inspiration session next week. So hopefully that is in your diaries. If not, I will chase up the invitation to make sure it is in your diaries. So the inspiration session happening next Thursday, and this third session will happen the following Thursday. I'll be uploading this video to the YouTube channel and sharing the links to those videos so you can watch them back on demand. You and your family can binge on them. The more views I get, hopefully, the more advertising income I get. And then, yeah, please do use the tools that we've talked through today. Have a go with them. If you have any questions, please reach out to me. And yeah, hopefully you're finding this useful as a way to start building from the bottom up and really scrutinizing and analyzing data. There we go. I think that'll do it today. There will be whiteboard next time.
Thanks, Joe.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you, everybody, and I hope you have great weekends if I don't talk to you beforehand.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, Joe.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks a lot.